Paris, 1863. The Palais de l'Industrie. The jury of the Paris Salon, the most powerful gatekeepers in the art world, had just finished judging the submissions for the year, and they are in a bad mood. So much so that they rejected over 3,000 paintings. 2/3 of the work submitted is deemed, quote, unworthy and, quote, bad art. Among the rejects is a painting by a man named Édouard Manet. It's called The Luncheon on the Grass. The jury hates it. The perspective is flat, they say. The lighting is harsh. The brushstrokes are visible and messy. It looks unfinished. It violates every rule of, quote, a good painting. The rejected artists are furious. They protest. The outcry is so loud that Emperor Napoleon III orders a separate exhibition for the outcasts. It's called Le Salon des Refusés, the exhibition of rejects. And the public actually comes to laugh. They come to mock the, quote, bad art. But a strange thing happens. They stop laughing and they stare. They're mesmerized. Monet's messy, flat, quote, bad painting becomes the most talked about piece in Paris. It launches modernism, and it changes how the world sees. And meanwhile, the good art, the polished, perfect, rule-following paintings, the one that won medals in the main hall, nobody remembers them. They were technically perfect, but completely dead. My name is Patrick Four, and this is the Terrible Photographer podcast, where we have honest conversations about creativity and identity and discovering your voice. I'm starting a new midweek series. I'm calling it Basics Deconstructed, but we aren't going to talk about the rule of thirds or leading lines, or we might, who knows. We're going to talk about the elementary concepts of our job and then deconstruct them until we find the bone and the meat. Today, we are tackling the biggest question of them all. I couldn't start the series without tackling this one. It's the one that paralyzes us when we're trying to build a website or edit a gallery or show clients or enter a competition. I'm talking about good versus bad. How do we measure it? Who decides? And why do we keep filling our portfolios with images that are, quote, correct, but boring as hell? And if this is your first episode, welcome. This is a little bit different from what we typically do. And these bonus episodes are a little bit shorter. They're irregular and in no particular order. So feel free to jump around. And as always, if you want to reach out, if you have questions, thoughts, hate mail, I respond to everything. I am so thankful for anyone who wants to take the time to send me a message. My email is in the show notes. Okay, so we have a problem with measurement. If you're a carpenter, you know if a table is good, right? Does it wobble? Is it level? Can it hold my beer? And if you're a mechanic, you know if an engine is running right. Does it turn over? Does it smoke? Does it sound funny? But photographers, it's more like we're trying to measure ghosts. And so sometimes, to compensate, we actually borrow the carpenter's metrics. You know, is it sharp? Is the histogram balanced? Is the horizon straight? We look at the technical data, the ISO, the dynamic range, the megapixels, like it's a credit score. Like we can try to prove our worth with numbers and graphs. And we build our portfolios like we're defendants on a trial. We present evidence of competence. Exhibit A, the sharpness. Exhibit B, the skin tone. Exhibit C, the golden hour glow. We're trying to convince a jury, the client, the algorithm, our own fragile ego that we're safe, that we know what we're doing, that we're professional. But here's the problem with that. Safety is the enemy of art. And when you build a portfolio on safety, you end up with a gallery that might be technically flawless, but emotionally bankrupt. You've proven you can operate a camera, the machine, but you haven't proven that you can see. So I learned this the hard way. I sat down and paid for a portfolio review with a woman. Let's call her Elena. Elena was an art buyer for a massive agency. She's also a photo rep. And she has seen probably 1 million photos. She has the eyes of a shark, dead to the bullshit, always hunting for blood. So I was there and I had laid out my freshly printed book. I had took the time to send photos to a lab, get them back, curate them, put them in the order that I wanted them to be. And it was clean. It was commercial. It was sanitized. I was kind of proud of it. I had the aspirational lifestyle shots for the tech company, couples holding iPads and laughing. I had the crisp product shot of the headphones with the colorful background. I had the moody studio portrait with the perfect catch lights. It was a good portfolio, I reckon. And Elena flipped through this thing fast. Flip, 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 flip. She didn't stop. And honestly, she looked bored. I was just staring at her eyes the entire time. She looked like she was just scrolling past ads for insurance. And then about 3/4 of the way through, she paused. There was a portrait of a guy, a chef, shot in the kitchen. And the composition was fine. The lighting was competent. The guy was smiling. It was nice. And Elena just stared at it for a second. And then she flipped the page. I thought she would have liked that one. That one didn't land? I asked. It's fine, she said. He looks good. He looks like he wants me to like him, but I don't really believe him. Ouch. She kept flipping. She got all the way to the back of the book, and I had made an amateur mistake. I had actually left a print in there. It was a personal shot that I took my daughter. I just stuck it in there probably months and months back. It was of my daughter, Lucy. It was black and white. It was high contrast. She was moving too fast and her hand was blurry in motion. She was sitting in grass, laughing. It was overcast Pacific Northwest day. She had one of those raincoats on with the rain boots, laughing so hard and moving so much, it blurred her face. I never thought it was great. It wasn't technically perfect, but it was an image of Lucy that I have in my head, full of joy, laughing in this melancholic scene. It's honestly one of my favorite shots of her, but it didn't belong in my book to be reviewed by advertising industry professionals. And Elena stopped. She put her hand on the photo. She leaned in. She said, "Where did this come from? Who took this?" She noticed the rogue 5x7 print that I had just stuck in the back page. "I did," I said. I'm not really sure why it's in there. I was embarrassed. It's not really commercial, you know? She looked at me like I was an idiot or on drugs or both. I don't hire photographers to be commercial, she said. I hire technicians to be sharp and safe. I hire photographers to make me feel something. She then flipped back at all those lifestyle images of all those product photos for corporations. These, she said, these are okay, they're good, they're polite, but they're asking for permission to exist. They're trying to be good. They're trying to sell me something. I know what they are right away. And then she pulled out this blurry, contrasty photo of Lucy and said, this one, though, is alive. This one doesn't give a shit if I like it or not. It has a pulse. She then flipped back to this chef portrait that I've always have been kind of proud of. She says, you know why this one doesn't work? Because you were being polite. You were waiting for him to give you something. You were standing outside of the moment, hoping it would come to you. She closed the book and placed the photo of Lucy on top. But this one, you were inside the moment. You weren't thinking about sharpness or composition. You weren't in your head. You were just there. You were a dad with a camera, not a photographer with a performance anxiety problem. And I walked out of that meeting. I was a little frustrated, you know? It was an overwhelming sense that I wanted to sort of blame the industry, you know? Blame the algorithm, blame Instagram, blame the rules of photography for teaching me something wrong, maybe. I wanted to blame the pixel peepers on YouTube for making me paranoid about sharpness. But then I realized the industry didn't make those photos boring. I did. The enemy wasn't the algorithm or the YouTube influencer bros. The enemy was my own fear. It was years of, I think, developing bad habits, calcifying into a reflex. It was the voice in my head saying, if you don't make it sharp, perfect exposure, perfect skin tones, then you're going to look like an amateur. It was panic I felt on every shoot when the silence got too long. So I would just hit the shutter to prove I was still working. I thought I was shooting good photos, you know, but I think really I was just shooting stuff that was safe. I spent the next few days, weeks, months trying to figure out what Elena meant. What the difference between a photo that polite was and a photo that had a pulse. What did she love about that blurry photo of Lucy, but then hated about my aspirational, technically perfect commercial work? And then I remembered something. When I was a kid growing up in the Midwest, we always had these parades, you know, on Memorial Day or 4th of July. You got the small town America stuff, flags, fire trucks, and the high school marching band. My parents would always take us down to Main Street and we would sit on the curb and we would watch the whole thing just roll by. And when it came time to the marching band, I always kind of hated it, you know? It was loud. And the cymbal players would always come first. You get these high notes, bright and sharp, crashing, so loud you would cover your ears. Did anyone else do that? It was impossible to ignore. But the second they would pass, you would forget them. They were just noise. They would start to fade in the distance. But then coming up behind them would be the snare drums. Those weren't as bad. They were still loud, but they weren't as bad. But then would come the bass drums. You know what I'm talking about? And you would begin to feel them before you heard them. They were the deep, low vibration in your chest. And you couldn't cover your ears to hide from the bass notes. It was in your bones. It was in the pavement you could feel under your feet. And that's the difference. High notes are easy to hear. They're bright, they're obvious. They rise above everything else. And in photography, the high notes tend to be sharpness and perfect skin tones and the perfect lighting and the smile for the camera moment. They're polite, you know, but they're loud. They're impossible to miss. The bass notes are the life. They're the meat. They're the thing that makes you feel the song in your chest before you even consciously register the melody. The bass notes are the vibration. They're the blur. They're the shadow, the movement, the grit. They're the things that anchor the image to the earth. And if you cannot capture the bass notes, if you're obsessed with keeping everything so goddamn clean, you cannot capture them if you're afraid of looking like you don't know what you're doing. You cannot capture them if you're shooting for approval instead of truth. And that's what I think Elena saw. That photo of Lucy had more bass than treble. The rest of my portfolio was just, I think, just clashing cymbals. So here's my question for us all. How do we break this habit? How do we stop shooting out of fear and start shooting out of the soul? How do we break out of the treble and lean more into the bass? First, I don't think it's about lens choice or anything technical. It's not about dragging your shutter to 1/30th because I told you to. You can't manufacture this stuff. I don't think it's mechanical. I think it's more behavioral. It might even be psychological. So after that meeting with Elena, I couldn't stop thinking about what she said. It was kind of haunting me. I needed to prove to myself that I could actually do it differently, you know, that I could get inside the moment. So I reached out to a model that I knew from Instagram. Her name was Stephanie. I told her that I wanted to shoot something a little uncomfortable, something dark, something melancholy, something that made you feel something other than pretty. So we met at 4:30 in the morning at the tide pools in La Jolla. It's one of my favorite places to shoot. As the night gives way to morning, there's this incredible blue, ominous glow that makes the rocks in the ocean look like a different planet. I've always been struck by this. I grabbed one strobe, a light stand, and a pure red gel. I wanted to make something that did not ask for permission. At first, it was working. Stephanie was moving through the tide pools. She was interacting with the space. The light was moody. It was alien. It was beautiful. The red gel was hitting her skin tone perfectly. And it was such a incredible contrast between this ominous blue environment. I was slowing down. I was letting the silences sit. I wasn't rushing. And then about 15, 20 minutes in, I started to notice it. Her posing. She was starting to tilt her head. You know, she was giving the camera a look. It was sultry. It was practiced. It was the kind of look that works on Instagram, you know? She was performing. It was sexy. It was flirtatious. It was a little thirst trappy, you know? And I hated it. She was performing. She was giving me what she thought that I wanted, what she sort of defaulted to when she was with other photographers. And I realized in that moment, if I let her keep doing this, the whole shoot would be dead. It would be ruined. It wouldn't make sense. It would be polite, safe, maybe the high notes. So I stopped the shoot. I put my camera down on my Pelican case. They're right there on the rocks. And I walked over and I was like, Stephanie, what are you doing? She looked confused. What do you mean? She said. You're performing. You're giving me what you think that I want, what you think other photographers wanted, and maybe even have asked you to do. But this is not what this is. She laughed nervously, as you could imagine. Okay, so what do you want from me? I said, looking her in the eye, I said, I don't know. But I want you to feel a little uncomfortable. I want you to feel vulnerable. I want you to feel alone. And I want you, above all, to forget that I'm here. This is where I want you to be. This is the space that I want you to be in right now. She looked at me like I was a little insane. Maybe I was. There was this long, awkward pause where she just looked down at her feet, said, okay, I'll try. I switched out my lens to my 135 and I moved back far away from her. I wanted her to feel alone. And that's when I lifted the camera. I shot her looking away. I photographed her looking confused, looking bored. And I photographed her when she stopped trying to be beautiful and just was. The rest of the shoot, she didn't perform once. She was present. She was human. She was real. It was incredible. Absolutely incredible. It was a moment that I'll never forget. And when I got home, I looked at these images and I knew the best shots, the most incredible shots were not the ones where she was trying, where she was performing. It was the ones where she had given up trying, where she had stepped outside of herself, where she had stopped overthinking. The ones where she forgot that the camera or I there. That's the thing that no one tells you about photography, is that great photography is rarely nice. I think the greatest portraits of all time weren't exactly flattering sometimes. They were just revealing. I think of Diane Arbus, didn't try to make her subjects feel comfortable. Richard Avedon didn't let his subjects hide. They were shrewd sometimes, you know? They were relentless. They were willing to be a nuisance, maybe even disliked in the moment. And I totally understand that there's a line here. Respect is non-negotiable. Cruelty is never the answer. Ethics are always important. But politeness, niceness, I think that can be fatal to creating something interesting. If someone is performing for you, if they're giving you the Instagram face or the practice pose, your job is not to accept it. Your job is to interrupt that shit. Your job is to bore them into authenticity. Your job is to be patient enough and shrewd enough to catch the moment when that mask slips. And here's the thing that ties it all together. Stop thinking like a photographer first. That's our mistake. You need to think like a human first. We get it backwards, you know. We think about the light and the composition and the gear. We obsess over the technical execution, but the technique is just the vehicle. It's not the destination. When I created that image of Lucy, the blurry one that Elena loved, I wasn't thinking about the shutter speed. I was thinking like a proud dad. I was trying to capture the chaos of her spirit, the wildness, the thing that makes me laugh and terrifies me at the same time. And in that moment, the camera was just a tool I used to execute what I had already felt. And that's the order of operations here. Feel it first, see it second, shoot it third. Your camera skills are just riding shotgun to this whole process. They don't drive the bus, despite what a lot of people make you think. They're there to execute the vision, your vision, not to create it. Let your anger drive. Let your sense of justice drive. Let your love drive. Let your confusion or your grief drive. The photographer is in the passenger seat. So, back to Manet. Here's this guy who broke every rule and got rejected by all the gatekeepers. And this is the same guy with the bad painting who launches a goddamn movement. He didn't set out to change the world. He just refused to sand down the rough edges, you know? He refused to make his work palatable to the jury. He painted what he saw, not what they wanted him to see. Maybe that's the real definition of good. It's not perfectly technical. It's not polite or nice or safe, but it's true. Elena taught me that. Or maybe she just reminded me of something that I already knew, something that I felt standing on that curb in my hometown of Freeport, waiting for the bass drums to shake my chest. The high notes and the treble, that gets noticed, that gets applause, but the bass notes are what you remember when the parade is over because you felt it in your bones. You don't need to go out and shoot a masterpiece today. You don't need to impress the jury. You just need to stop apologizing for the blur. So the next time you look at a photo you took, and it's a little soft, or the composition is weird, or it's just a little bit too dark, I don't want you to delete it. Don't let the carpenter tell you that it's broken. I want you to ask yourself if it plays. Ask yourself if you can feel it in your chest. If it feels true, it's good. If it feels safe, it's dead. Stay curious, stay courageous, and yeah, stay terrible.